Okay, so you're saying that you redone the Judgment from Paris with the same wines, same vintages in California and London,
Yeah,
high level tastings.
yeah. Well, we did it. It was an extraordinary event because we did it on May the 24th, which was the date in 1976. Simultaneously in Napa, they began to taste at 10 o'clock in the 10 o'clock in the morning, and we began to taste at 6 o'clock in the evening. And so we had to taste at the same time. And the results came out. We were on. By the time the results came out, we were having dinner. But anyway, we were tracking the results on a big board.
Nice.
And it was extraordinary. I mean, the team that I was tasting with and my judgments weren't taken into account, as they weren't in Paris either. And Patricia Gallagher, who was my partner in the Academy de Vin at the time, had gone to Napa, and her comments weren't taken into account. So we already knew as a team the ranking we'd put, and California was almost identical. And when you join the two rankings together, as I said, the California Reds took the first 5 places, and that was because people have said over the years, the Bordeaux tasted too early. Well, I did the tasting again in '86, and instead of having the Californians took the first 2 top places. But anyway, it was really a triumph for California at that time. And then we tasted openly, not blind, the 2000 vintage, and this time Bordeaux wines won totally and utterly. So I said it was California was resting on its laurels. California was resting on its laurels in the 2000 vintage, and France had been resting on its laurels in the 1970s. And so the change, a bit of shock does you good.
Good. We met in Rio when we were doing a tasting for Chadwick with Senya and Bordeaux wines together with some Super Tuscans. You do a lot of tastings like this. I've heard you made one in Russia, for example.
Well, I mean, I do them when Eduardo Chadwick had the idea of doing this comparative tasting with his Vigneto Chadwick, his Senya, and his Errázuriz Don Maximiliano. In Berlin, 2004, he asked me whether I'd be on the panel, and I said yes, sure. And I hadn't really gathered what it was about, but he was not trying to copy the Judgment of Paris, but what happened inevitably when out of 12 wines, Eduardo's wines took first, second, and fourth place. It became known as the Judgment of Berlin, or the Berlin tasting. Mm-hmm. And once he'd done it in Berlin, and it was a fantastic result for him. Once he'd done it in Berlin, then he did it in Amsterdam. He did it straight away. He did it in Santiago in Chile, and very soon he did it. Must have been 2008. He did it in both Sao Paulo and Rio, and then in all over the place. And I was with him at his last 3 tastings in America, in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. And so he'd held, with those 3, he'd held 13 tastings. And in the top 5 wines, that would have left 13 top 5 wines, 65 wines. The Chilean wines took 33 out of the 65 places in the top 5, good. Which is 51%. And I think that was over 7 years, which is quite extraordinary. So, the theory is, which he proved, and he's proved it much more definitely than the Judgment of Paris, which was just 1 tasting, that if you're an unknown wine, one of the ways to get known is to go up against the benchmarks. And then if you're judged equally as good, or sometimes even better than the benchmarks, then you can say, I'm as good as the benchmarks. And that's really, that widens the world of wine. Mm-hmm. And what Eduardo has done, not only for his own wines, but for Chilean wines in general, is amazing. Because
I think you did recently in Russia, right? Something.
No, we're doing, Eduardo is doing a tasting in Russia at the end of May. Mm-hmm. I did a couple of tastings in Russia of California Cabernets around the world and Chardonnays around the world, but it was based on, because it was me, it was based on the blind tasting concept. And I just done one in Budapest with 12 Cabernet blends around the world, 2 from Hungary, and then one from Russia, one from New Zealand, one from Australia, blah blah blah, all over. And the Hungarian wines came 4th and 5th, which is fantastic.
So how many times did you repeat this kind of tasting through your life?
I think I think it's, yeah, I'll only do it if I can control it to a certain extent. I mean, Eduardo Chadwick is in control of the tastings he does, but I like and admire Eduardo tremendously, and I know that that's going to be correct. I won't ever be just a hired hand to do that kind of thing. If I'm going to be asked to do a comparative blind tasting, and people are going to look at the results afterwards, I have to be in control of the tasting.
Okay. Is there anything left to say about the Judgment of Paris?
No, I don't think so, not much, except it seems to have got a life of its own.
Yes. It became a film,
well,
book.
Yeah, the film. Well, the book was good. The film was not really based on. Well, the film was a little.
It was fiction.
It's fiction. Yeah, it's fiction, but it's fun. It's a fun movie. Yeah.
And what are your present and future projects?
Well, I guess most of what I do is to work for Decanter magazine. I consult for Singapore Airlines, which I've been doing for more than 20 years. I created with Michael Broadbent the Christie's Wine Course in 1982, and that's still ongoing. And I have a company in India, the Wine Society of India, which is the first mail order club in India, which I created with a partner, and I was just in India last week. But I would say that I align myself to Decanter more than anything else I do. And next week, you've been tasting at the International Wine Challenge. Decanter World Wine Awards starts next week. We're going to have the Decanter Asia Wine Awards in Hong Kong in September. I mean, anything which is involved tasting and communication, that's what I really like. I mean, I love going to tastings. I love communicating with people. I certainly enjoy being a well-known name and a well-known face, because I didn't expect that. And well, there's Oz Clarke and Jancis Robinson and Michael Broadbent and Hugh Johnson, so I'm not alone in that. But I get the impression that people read what I write, they pay attention to what I say, and in a kind of relaxed way. I'm not a pontificator like Robert Parker, who I admire tremendously.
Bless you.
But I don't, I just give my opinion, which is a sort of English opinion. You don't want to shout too much. You're a little bit restrained. But I love wine. It's been my entire life, and so to continue working in the wine trade and basically in communications, is really wonderful, because to me that keeps on widening the field.
Great to hear this, because I do.
Well, I mean,
you're doing the job, yes.
You're doing the same thing.
Let me. Okay, this is a present.
Thank you very much.
Wines of Brazil, your book.
Thank you very much.
I know you like Brazilian wines. You
very much.
Wrote about them sometimes.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And what's your opinion? Do we have a niche in this market, in this crazy and wild world market for wine?
World market, I think so. I mean, I think you are both helped and hindered by having Chile and Argentina. So the help is that we view, and the European markets will view them as South American wines. Okay, so it's an advantage for you to say we're the next South American wine, and you're hindered a bit because Chile and Argentina have really got the market, and Uruguay, who were trying to sell their wines on the UK market even 10, 15 years ago, have never really made an impact. They've never, I don't know why. So I think Brazilian wines will become better known in Europe, but bit by bit. You have to,
yes.
you've got the big steamroller that is Chile. Yeah, exactly. But I think you will, because restaurants now, particularly in London, are selling many more wines by the glass, and they're selling them in 250 cl carafes and 500 cl carafes. So, if you look at a wine list, and they're only selling wines by the bottle, and you come across a Brazilian wine, you might not want to buy a whole bottle. But if you see a glass of Brazilian wine on the wine list, a glass, you say, let's try it. And that's really...
I went to a shop yesterday, the sampler, and they have
a sampler is brilliant.
Brazilian wine by the glass.
Oh, that's great. Well, the sampler is communication par excellence. They have something like 120 wines opened by the glass. And people go there to try something they never tried before. For X pounds you can have a little taste if you can. That's fine. That's tasting the absolute nec plus ultra. But to me, it's more fun to try a Brazilian wine.
So you're invited to visit Brazil.
Well, thank you
go
very
to the
much.
wine region. Thank you very much. Muito obrigado.
Muito
abraço a todos e saúde.
Thank you. That's great.